right, I think we're going to get rolling. Welcome to ArcGIS Online, taking data offline. So there's a little bit of irony there, but ArcGIS Online is really kind of the hub of things, even going offline. My name is Paul Barker. This is Chris Whitmore. We both work on the ArcGIS Online team as product engineers. So our role is largely making sure that the software works for you at the end of the day. So our job is to be a champion for the user and make sure that we're meeting your workflows. So we don't really write code, although I will show a little bit of code just because it's Dev Summit. Just a rough look at what we're going to cover today. We're going to go through a little bit of background about offline, talk about the offline story and what you can do today across a variety of different apps. Share some best practices when using and working offline, and then talk a little bit about what you can do in the future and what's coming down the pipe. Some of that you saw hints of at the plenary today. So that's the general schedule today. A little bit of background, I guess, show of hands, how many people are using offline in at least one app or custom app? Cool. How many are looking to figure out how to do that? Awesome. I guess show of hands, collector and survey 1, 2, 3 all in one go. Anybody using map packages in Explorer? And anybody navigating with Navigator? Nice. That's a good spread. So it should come to no surprise to you folks that we live in an increasingly always-on world, but you don't have to go that far to find a dead zone, and in many parts of the world there's no coverage at all, or intermittent coverage. And it's tough to see with the lighting, but that screenshot is showing areas of LTE coverage in New Zealand, and you can see very quickly that it's largely isolated to where those major roads are in the coast and other populated areas. So, and even within dense urban centers, you run into dead zones where you don't have good coverage, you can't collect information in a connected environment, and I think everyone can sympathize with this, but the people that you're supporting in the field, they don't get to go home if all of a sudden they get no data coverage. They're expected to keep working, and that's important. And any time you send people in the field, you want them to be able to keep working. And one of the ways that you can really ensure that is to take that data offline, even if you don't expect to need it. It's a good way to be defensive ahead of time. If you can plan that in advance, it allows you your field staff to keep moving, keep collecting data. And I'm always a big advocate of having a backup plan. Paper is great as a last resort, but it really breaks that flow of information. So you get a longer turnaround time to when that data is useful. That staff in the back office who are prioritizing, say, maintenance requests, if they've got a stack of papers, there could be some real high priority requests in there that get missed just because they haven't made it through that data collection cycle. So being able to have that information seamlessly flow across your organization is really important. And a key part of doing that along the way is having offline-based workflows where you can synchronize that data and then it's available to users. So in terms of what you can do today, there's a lot that you can do today across all the different apps, and I'm going to let Chris chat a little bit about that and share some of that today. So this is just a quick sampling of some of the apps that support offline today.
All right, cool. Thanks, Paul. So as Paul had a show of hands a few minutes ago, there are a few different apps that we offer that you can take offline, whether it's a Collector for collecting data, whether it's a Navigator or Explorer, or even more recently, ArcGIS Pro for downloading your web map and performing edits and having them sent back to the server, or taking your surveys offline for survey 1, 2, 3. And as Paul mentioned with Navigator and also for Explorer, you generate your mobile map package in Pro, and then you provide it to your users, and then they can then go offline and do their routing or their exploration. For Collector, you set up your layer, and then you put in a web map, and then you can then take your web map offline in the app itself. And I'm going to walk through those steps with a quick demo of how you would do that. All right, cool. So first, I don't know how many folks are familiar with this, but ArcGIS Online offers a suite of feature layer templates They are purpose-driven with the intent of whatever you need to do with them. They're based by industry, whether it's agriculture, electric utilities, and so on. So for this particular case, I'm going to select water utilities, and I have hydrant inspections that I need to have performed. And what this will do is create a feature layer template or a feature layer with a specific schema geared towards collecting hydrant data. And this will be an empty layer that you can then take offline immediately and start populating with data. And one thing I want to call out here is that you can also capture the GPS receiver information if you're interested in capturing the metadata about the GPS on a per record basis. And that's invaluable in high accuracy workflows. And then you can then set your extent for whatever that location is. And the network seemed a little bit slow today, so I actually have a layer created from this already ready to go. So I created my hydrant inspections layer, and so now I have an empty layer that's ready to collect data. And a couple things I want to call out here is, first, you can see 0 features. So this is an empty layer ready to start collecting. And it's already configured with editing capabilities. It's ready to edit. It's editor tracking is enabled, so you can see who made the edits and who created the features. And then also it's sync enabled, so it means it's ready to go offline in a disconnected editing workflow. So now, a wrinkle that I want to show is, in a lot of cases that, maybe this is the next round of inspections. Maybe you already have your hydrant IDs, and you have an empty layer and you have your hydrant IDs in some other data set, and you want to bring them into the layer to start performing new inspections. Well, you can use append in this workflow to take those hydrant IDs and append them into your feature layer. And field matching was set up already. These first fields are for the GPS receiver metadata. However, what I have is that my IDs match, and that's what I need to know for my hydrant IDs. So I'm going to apply this update. And the one thing that I want to point out with this is that this is not quite ready live on ArcGIS Online. It's coming the next month. Don't touch the table too quickly. So the append with sync enabled will be released in ArcGIS Online next month. So technically this part is not available yet, but that will be a powerful addition to this already existing workflow of creating an empty layer. All right, so the append is done, and to show you that it's there, look, all of a sudden I have 1,400 hydrants with ready to be populated with last service date, and any other information, and also ready to start collecting the GPS receiver information, which collector will automatically do if those fields exist on the layer. All right, so I have my data layer ready to start taking in data. The next step is to actually create a web map that you will then take offline with that data. All right. So I have my wells, and I won't make any changes. I'll just save the web map as it is. And then at this point, the web map is ready to go. You could take it offline in Collector and start using it. But there's one thing I want to point out here with the web map first, is that there's an offline settings in the settings tab for the web map's item details, and there's a show advanced options. And what this allows you to do is configure how data is retrieved from the server, in the sense that maybe you have a lot of attachments, a lot of photos of the hydrants as part of the inspection workflow, and that can get pretty big pretty quickly. So rather than have to take all the data offline that you don't really need, since you're really going to be performing edits, you can uncheck attachments, and attachments won't be included. And so it really just kind of helps streamline the workflow. And you can also do that for any read-only feature layers you're using as reference. I'll leave this.
One thing to note there too is that that doesn't prevent your field workers from adding their own attachments. All that means is that they won't see other people's attachments. So when they're synchronizing data, it really cuts down on the traffic for your mobile devices. So if you're tight on data plans, that's a really good way to keep that payload pretty small.
right, cool. All right, thanks, Paul. And so really the web map is ready to go. You can take it offline in Collector, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to really show that actually within the Collector app. But what you would see is, you go find this hydrant inspections web map in Collector, and there'll be a little offline icon with it. You download and you set your work area, and then you can take the map offline, and it's really that straightforward. So it's really powerful that you can start with an empty layer and then get to a web map that's ready to go offline in 10 minutes and actually add seed data to that that your inspectors can then use. And it's really, why I did the hydrant inspections demo, it really is applicable to any workflow that you need to go offline. And the last thing I want to show is back on the hydrant inspections layer is, I didn't need to in this case, but you can delete fields and you can also add fields. So maybe those data collection templates, they don't have exactly the schema you need. You need to tweak it a little to fit your particular workflow, but you can come here and you can do those sorts of things. You can then add the field, you can perform some calculation and set default values, all sorts of things. So it's really powerful to go from the beginning empty layer to the web map in really no time at all. And that's it. I think Paul's going to show where we're going, which will be a game changer.
I'm going to hit 3. All right. Before we jump into this slide, I'll just help stress what Chris was saying. Those feature service templates are, well, they might look like they come from Esri. They really don't. They come from our solutions team, which ultimately comes from you guys as users. So they're a really great way and a good starting point to get going. Maybe you don't want to spend a month in meetings debating schemas and nomenclature. They're all pulled from the local government information model for the most part, so they can really save time getting up and running to prototype a project, prove something out. So they're getting added to all the time, so really take advantage of those to kind of kickstart and get into things. These are just some tips and tricks that we've kind of compiled over the years. There's a lot to keep in mind when sending people to the field, and while it's not even on this slide, the people in the field are not GIS people. They have their own specialty, they have their own things that they're concerned about. Whenever possible, you want to make that technology that you're adding to their workflow frictionless. And part of that is understanding what they need in the field, and then matching that to the capabilities of the apps that are available, or if you're writing your own custom apps. So, if they're doing simple surveys that aren't geographically focused, and they need some additional form logic, Survey 123 is probably the right answer instead of Collector. If they need high accuracy and they're doing really detailed geometry-based data collection, maybe gravitate towards Collector. And really put yourself in their shoes if you can. I've been fortunate in the years to go out and observe people in the field, and you instantly learn a lot by watching someone work and try and use technology. Things that you don't think about in the office, like the right cartography. A lot of times you're in really high sunlight or in really dark environments, and matching your symbology to those environments is a really good idea. Like in sunlight, you might have these beautiful cartographic symbols for a story map that fail miserably when you look at them in the field because there's too much detail. You can't see that when it's sunny. And so focus on those little details. Keep it simple and clear, because that's going to help keep your field workers moving. Things like taking time to rename your pop-ups so that the fields are clear. Same with layer names. I'm guilty of publishing 30-character long layer names with underscores across all of it. Take the time to replace the underscores. And one of the new things that we've added, how many people are familiar with hosted feature layer views? If you haven't looked at them, take the time to do so. So hosted feature layer views are a really good way to tailor the experience for the field users. And what they are really just, if you've got a feature service, you can create essentially a child feature service from it that has different sharing capabilities, different editing capabilities. You can filter data geographically or by attributes. And so you can actually restrict someone to a very specific subset of that data. And there's no data duplication across that. The view, the feature layer all point back to the same table at the end of the day. So they're a really good way to provide focus in the field. And if you're fortunate enough to maintain your own air photos, or maybe you regularly get updates from somebody like Digital Globe, You can save a lot of time downloading maps by taking your imagery and creating a tile package ahead of time and then side loading it onto the device. That, like with Collector, that'll let you, you can happily put a 30 gig air photo on your device and use that as a base map. And it'll perform great and work well. And that's kind of what you can do today. But I think one of the really exciting things is what we're going to be able to do in the future. And if you were at the plenary, Justin showed a little bit of this. The idea that ahead of time, the map author or the person supporting someone in the field can pre-author a series of map areas to be available and ready to download so that your field user doesn't have to think about that. They know they're working over by the Palm Springs Airport. They pick that from the list, and that's what they work within. And so while it's not all here today, if you're a runtime developer, you can actually start using this technology today. It's released, and you can take advantage of it. And one of the nice things is with the Python API, you can create map areas, and that'll save you some time with working directly against the REST endpoint. We do have a plan to build a great user experience for you guys to manage this all within ArcGIS Online, but this is kind of, right now, it's released for developers. And so this is going to be coming over the next couple releases as more of a mainstream concept in ArcGIS Online. And without further ado, I will show some code and see how well this goes. Let me just hop over here and enter present. Oh, did I lose? Just give me a second, guys. 3, right? Wow, that's not going to show up very well. I apologize for the hang on. Give me 2 seconds. Let's change the color here. There we go. That's a little easier to read. So the amount of code that you have to write to do this actually isn't that complicated. So if you're familiar with the Python API at all, there's a pretty standard pattern here where you set up your GIS and pass it a portal, a username, and a password. I happen to be loading it from a separate JSON file just so that I don't share my credentials with you. And then the next step here is I'm getting the web map. And so I use the GIS portion of the Python API to say content.get. I pass it my map ID from my web map. And then I assign that web map to a variable as a web map. From there, I can actually get the offline areas. Now, if you're creating map areas from scratch, you don't really need to worry too much about that. In my particular code, I'm cleaning up the old offline map areas ahead of time. So what I'm doing is I'm getting all the map areas in the web map that are existing, I'm deleting those, and then the meat of the code right here is getting the bookmarks from the web map and then looping through the bookmarks and using the bookmarks as a way to create map areas. So if you happen to have set up great bookmarks, you don't need to go recreate and figure out what the extent of those bookmarks are. Just pass them through and it'll create a map area. And so what this is going to do is go off here and say, I'm going to use the bookmark name to make my map area. I'm going to give it a title, and I'm going to call it the name of the bookmark plus offline area. I'll give it a little snippet because it's going to create a map area item. You won't see it online in your content, but it's going to be there. And then a little bit of status message here. So if I ran that, let me just hop out here. Oh, come on. Exit presentation mode. So let me just pull this up. Oh, sorry, I hit the wrong button there. Exit. Huh. All right. So if I ran this right now, it's going to go out. It's going to call that script and walk through the code. And what it's going to do is go out and create a map area for each bookmark. like Chris was saying, the network's a little slow today, so it'll take a while to do. But normally with something like this, I think there's 5 map areas. It takes roughly a couple minutes per map area to go out and make each map area. And that's roughly it. Sorry, not back here. So I guess a show of hands, how many people are interested in using the map areas as a way to kind of improve the user experience? That's great. One thing you saw that I passed a bookmark. The things that we support today in the API are bookmarks or an extent. What we do want to support in the future is passing a geometry directly to that map area. So say you had something like a pipeline or a hydro corridor. An extent doesn't work well for that, and you get a lot of waste. So being able to narrow that down and have that nice linear feature captured well, or if you're using the Python API, what you could potentially do is loop through a feature service, get all the features in the feature service, and use those to create the map area. So there's lots of stuff that you can do there. So we're working towards that. But right now today, it's bookmarks. You can pass a bookmark to it by name, or you can pass an extent in JSON to the actual create map area call. And so I showed this with the Python API. If you don't want to use the Python API, or you want more control over the parameters that you pass when you create those map areas, you can just work directly with the REST API. The offline map area GP services that you'll work with are all documented as part of the ArcGIS REST API on developers.com. So what you'd get there is you'd have the ability to say, you'll notice I didn't pass any levels of detail for the base map of what I wanted to use offline. The Python API by default makes a best guess. It targets a nice happy tile size that's not too big, not too small. But if you wanted the control to say, I want level 0 to 18 for this area, you could do that directly against the REST API. Or if you wanted to adjust maybe some of the synchronization settings that you said, I only want to download updates and I don't want to bidirectional sync, you have that control at the API level. And that's it. We left a little bit of extra time because we were hoping you guys had lots of questions. So fire away. We'll do our best to help. Yes.
When collector can you handle vector types?
Great question. The question was, when can collector handle vector tiles? So the collector, prefaces, I'm not on the collector team, but so the collector app that you're using today, my understanding is that the new version of collector is when you'll start being able to get vector tiles. So if you're part of I believe there's a early adopters program for collector on iOS for what they're calling the Aurora project, that allows you to work with vector tiles. I double checked that with the collector island, but that's my understanding. And so pre-planned, I guess I didn't clarify that. The pre-planned map area stuff, when you take it offline, that supports both raster and vector base maps. So if you're using one of our new vector base maps, that's going to package that up as a vector tile package, and you'll be able to use that offline. That's a good point. Thank you for asking.
Hi, yes.
I just talked to the collector people, and they said that iOS, they were a project for the next version of collector is going to be available for iOS at UC timeframe, July, and endpoint at the end of the year.
Oh, bringing good news. So so it will be available for iOS, the next version of collector at the UC timeframe, and then Android at the end of the year. Is that?
Yeah. Anybody else? All right. Well, if you think of questions later, come by the online island, and we're happy to answer them. Please take the time to fill out the surveys. We spend a lot of time reviewing that information so that we can make these more productive for you folks. So please take the time to give feedback. If Chris's jokes weren't funny, let somebody know. Things like that.
Always funny. Thank you, everyone.